right, let's get started. Good morning, afternoon, and evening for all participants today. I'm Wei Chow, the FAOA Korea Chapter President. I want to thank everyone for coming. Before we begin, I want to remind the attendees that this discussion is part of our coffee and chat series. This is our more informal discussion series where we can engage in a smaller group setting for more in-depth and open discussion. For your awareness, the contents discussed today are approved for public release. So bear that in mind as you ask your questions. I understand almost everyone here works in a classified setting to some degree, so please keep that in mind. Following some opening questions from our moderator, which is Adrian today, we'll open up for discussion from the group. Joining us today on the very significant anniversary, or immediately after the anniversary for those in Korea, of the start of the Korean War, is a trailblazer in the Army, Major General retired Suzanne Vares-Lum. Her 34-year career spanned assignments during the Cold War to Iraq, culminating in 5 years advising the senior leaders at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. She served in key roles on the forefront of America's primary national security challenges, from China, Russia, and North Korea to violent extremist organizations and natural disasters. She is now translating those strategic insights into a civilian executive career. Thank you for joining us, General Vares-Lum. I will now cede the floor to you for any introductory statements, and our moderator, who specifically asked for this opportunity to engage with you, Adrian Romero. Take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Wei. And it's so great to see some familiar faces on here. I hope that you all have your coffee with you so we can just have a great time chatting, or water, yes, or whatever beverage, depending on what time of day it is for you out there. This is so great. I am so really honored and inspired that you would invite me, because I understand that you've had some superstars like, Admiral Harris, General Gillette, and, but of course they probably were very much pleased to be with all of you superstars. I was just bragging about your chapter today. I went to change of command at PACOM today, and I was talking to our foreign policy advisor, former ambassador to Mongolia, and I was just sharing about how just forward thinking all of you are to put this organization together, to look for ideas, to expand your own professionalism on your own, taking your evenings and weekends to do this. So very impressed. And so it is my honor to be a part of this chat today. And I hope, I can share a little bit about, my insights, or any questions really, as long as Wei said, it's something that we can share with others outside of this room. But my door is always open if you would like to chat one-on-one. I am committed to mentorship. And having served 34 years, I joined in 1986, I tell people, when there was East and West Germany. And they're like, wow, that's a long time ago. And actually, I was on the Missouri. I did a promotion today also. And that USS Missouri was in operation when I was in service. So that's how old I am, but that's okay. You guys are the next generation, so I'm excited to be here with all of you. So over to you, Adrian. I know you got some questions.
All right. Yes, I do. Appreciate that introduction and letting us know your background. And it's a pleasure to have you here. And based off of your experiences is kind of what we're tailoring this questioning is for you, because you've been an outspoken leader in the Women, Peace, and Security program. But for those that are unfamiliar, can you please elaborate on this and how the Department of Defense is engaged in this field?
So just as Wei said, I was 5.5 years actually at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. So my first boss was really Admiral Harris. And I got involved because he was forward thinking and forward leaning on the Women, Peace, and Security program. So Women, Peace, and Security, it's now an act, it's in law, it's a requirement. Actually, Admiral Harris was the first one to actually come up with an instruction. And he assigned me, since I was in the 5 with James, I don't know if you remember that, he assigned me as the WPS, James Kim there, I see you over there on my right side of my screen. But anyway, he assigned me to be the representative for the Council of Foreign Relations because they had asked him to provide insights. So I was that representative. And then we saw that, the United States, we had a national action plan that that we signed in 2011 as a country, and then DoD implementation guidance that came right after that. But most recently, we've had an updated DoD implementation guidance really in June of 2020. So while this COVID was going on, we've had a second iteration of the DoD implementation framework. And it's now an act, so there's money put against it. So at Indo-Pacific Command, where if you're in this region, you all fall under, we actually have a Women, Peace, and Security Gender Advisor for now Admiral Aquilino. So this is really a huge milestone. And I just want to share with you, you can look it up. It's called the DoD Implementation Guidance and Framework. And it outlines exactly what Department of Defense we're supposed to do, and it has several lines of effort. The first one is seeking and supporting the preparation and meaningful participation of women around the world, so wherever you are, in decision-making processes related to conflict and crisis. The second one is promoting the protection of women and girls, human rights, and boys. And the women, peace, and security word is deceiving because it started with that because the UN found that women and girls are the higher percentage of victims of conflict throughout the world. And we saw that, right? Everyone here has served in the Middle East and CENTCOM. You saw that but then you could also say if you're in Afghanistan, it would be boys as well. You saw what happened with Chai boys and Bachi Bazi, the exploitation of boys. You saw that if you were in Kosovo, you saw what happened to teenage boys who potentially were warfighting age, boys soldiers. So that word women, some people say maybe it should be gender, peace, and security. When we look at through a lens of a gender lens and how a society looks at gender. So that's the second line of effort. And of course, the third one is to adjust U.S. international programs to improve equality and empowerment of women in the security sector as well as governance. So in other words, this idea of that women should be part of the peace process, like we see in Rwanda, we see that successful coming to the table to discuss peace process. We see it we saw it in Marari in 2017 in the Philippines, and even in Korea. So if you remember when the THAAD was on there, a lot of protests blocking the road. Yeah. I was really impressed that the Republic of Korea had gotten more women police because many of the protesters were older women. So not only just because of optic, but because they could relate, they studied the environment in which they were going in, and then they adjusted who engages the civilian population. And the UN has identified this. And so the ROC, as well as other countries who give peacekeeping forces into places that are very unstable, like the continent of Africa, where gender-based violence is a common occurrence, the UN now requires, a certain percentage of that peacekeeping force to be women. So countries like Bangladesh have met that requirement. Other countries who want to give peacekeeping forces are meeting that requirement because, it changes the dynamic when a peacekeeping force goes into another country and it's not all predominantly male. It actually looks like the place in which you're visiting. I like this quote by General Dempsey. He wrote the book Radical Inclusion with Ori Brofman on, Starfish and the Spider. Ori Brofman that General Milley was promoting to all of us to read. This concept that if you cut off the head of a spider, it dies. If you cut off the leg of a starfish, it grows into another one. So this concept and idea. But anyway, General Dempsey also wrote a book on radical inclusion. And this idea of inclusivity started when he was really the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And this is a quote that we often use with Women, Peace, and Security. He said, when we undercut the contributions of one gender, we do so at our own peril, denying ourselves half the talent, half the resources, half the potential of the population. And as we approach future challenges, we must think rather than fight our way through it. We need to enable, to leverage all of the best thinking out there. So it's this idea that women, peace, and security, you know, those of you who've been deployed, you saw what happened when we didn't think through going in to a country that's predominantly Muslim, and men didn't have access. Our infantry soldiers did not have access to the female population. That's 50%. So what did we do? We are so dynamic in the military. We adjusted fire and we created female engagement teams very rapidly. And we just said, hey, you're a cook, you're a truck driver, just come. I don't care if you're trained, we're going to do a cordon and search and you're going to go. Therefore, endangering not the whole team, both men and women, by not having a trained set. We didn't think through the environment, or when we're distributing aid, we're not thinking through the environment of, well, if I give all of this aid and to whoever comes, we found that in certain places in parts of Africa where men were taking it and selling it on the black market and wondering why certain villages were starving because we didn't look. So we changed it and said, okay, women have to pick up the aid. Well, then we didn't think about the fact that they were being ambushed on the way to their village. So the people were not getting the food and the aid in the first place. So we needed to think through, okay, now I've got a secure distribution route so that it gets to the location. So that's a gender lens, looking at the environment, whether it's, conflict, crisis, and natural disasters. We see what's happening with the Rohingya, what's happening to girls as victims, human trafficking, all those kinds of things. So that's what WPS is huge. It is not just about equality, it's about participation, it's about consideration, it's about analyzing the environment in which we're going into, and it's about training our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, civilians on what we do. And that's why the requirement of this act is to have gender advisors at battalion level, even if it's an additional duty. There is now money put against it so that you can have this type of thing. Now, as FAOs, what I've been very fortunate to do a lot of engagements with some of you, Chris and James. You know, we've gone out to different countries, and each time we've been very fortunate to engage. You know, the country teams there, the ambassadors there have arranged a women's sort of a circle where I was able to talk to women of that particular service, whether it's Mongolia, Malaysia, Bangladesh, or Timor-Leste, just to be able to talk about, just to see. Sometimes it's difficult to become, you can't become what you don't see. You can either see it in your mind or you see it with your eyes. And you have to have vision on what the possibilities are to allow everyone equal participation in society. And so that's kind of, the background of WPS. The IndoPACOM is leading the way. So when Admiral Aquilino did his testimony, if you watch his testimony, you will see that several congresswomen asked him, what is IndoPACOM doing about women, peace, and security? And how are you implementing? And he, of course, his one full support. Admiral Davidson, I did a quad with Australia, Japan, and India and the United, and I was the U.S. representative of women, peace, and security, key leaders, like the first, surface warfare strike group officer, Captain Kawashima from the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, and then did the admiral who's in charge of all the southern area of India medical team, as well as Captain Philippa Hay, who was the first female to do a co-sail, a combined task force during RIMPAC. And one of her best partners was a Korean officer who also did the joint sail with her, sailing back all the way back to, the Asia. And then they split off to go to Australia. But we did this quad, and the opening comments came from Admiral Davidson, who has been very much a staunch supporter because he understands the value and importance of meaningful participation of women in conflict prevention, management, resolution, post-conflict recovery. And we saw that in Marari, where the Philippines, Armed Forces of the Philippines actually deployed a whole battalion of Muslim women to Marari. And if you remember, that was I don't know, James, if you were there when Marari, were you there 2017? Remember when, no, maybe not. Gosh, but that was, you know, a city of 250,000, most 70% displaced. A lot of further radicalization could occur, but they looked at the environment. If we don't take care of the people, you know, what's going to happen? We need to engage the women to find out what's happening and what the needs are. So that was really powerful. Anyway, I think I went on 10 minutes already. Sorry, Adrian.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, what you said is good key points. DoD implementation, and I think that what you're saying is, what I'm hearing is IndoPACOM is setting the standard, basically for across the globe, for the rest of the globe to see how women, peace, security fits in, and gender equality, which goes into the next question. But what you said, I looked into that and says half the potential, half the talent. But what I looked into, it says Air Force Brigadier General Rebecca Sunkist. It's a tool for smart power. There's a quote from her. So I totally agree with everything that you say, and as we start to see more gender equality across the ranks in the military, and allow that more diverse thinking into problem setting, into the problem sets that we have. So the next question for that is, from my understanding of the relevance of women, peace, and security, and for the developed nations such as Japan and South Korea, how much of the gender equality is being developed in those nations, and what is the role of women, peace, security in these nations, if you've seen any change in those nations from your perspective?
Thanks, Adrian. That's a great question, because people see, you know, I love telling people, Admiral Kondo in Japan, she has been a partner of mine. A lot of, you know, Japan Womenomics they have really pushed forward in implementing and using the talent of women there, and integrated them in their forces, military, lawyers. So recently, about right before I retired, General Wilsbach hosted a Women, Peace, and Security Forum at PACAF and invited 50 countries, did it on Zoom, and some came in person. So Japan came, France, all of our Five Eye partners, other Southeast Asian countries, they sent mostly women, but General Wilsbach was there most of the time, because it was important to have male leadership, you know, in this. This is not a woman's issue. This is a human issue. This is a security issue. And men and women are going to have to deal with it. So having more men at leading these pieces are critical. In fact, the Joint Staff held and DoD just had a large conference, and I think this before General Richardson, Southcom commander, we had several 4-star male leaders who led this discussion. And I think Japan has really stepped up. I'm looking forward that South Korea, I think, acknowledges it on different levels. And I'm looking forward to them continuing to boost women's participation in security, because they have a significant leadership role throughout the region. And throughout the region, not everybody has access, like Korea and Japan, to healthcare, education, a seat at the table, a voice. You know, those basic human rights don't exist in many parts of this region and the world. And while you get that wonderful education in Japan and Korea, and yet they have so they both have so much to offer the region in saying, look what can happen. Because I'll tell you the statistic that the UN has found, and I don't have the exact numbers, but if you look at the list of corrupted countries that are corrupt, the way in which women and children and vulnerable populations are treated, there's a direct correlation with the economic success. So in Japan and Korea, women have wonderful access to education, wonderful access to healthcare, right? They're protected from violence. Those very basic human rights, you see how successful economically those countries are. But that's not the case for many countries in our region, and yet they have a leadership role. And when you talk about, I know you're going to talk to me a little bit about the trilateral cooperation. When you look at the consequences of gender-based violence, whether it's 78 years ago. Now, those of you who are there in the region know what I'm talking about, that continues to resurrect. If you don't think gender-based violence has a security element 78 years later, just ask any of you when you try to get people at the table to talk about something. What comes up? Historic gender-based violence concerns. Go to Kosovo, go to former Yugoslavia. You can ask. Those problems will resurrect its ugly head years later when you want to talk about other security issues. So it is in our interests to ensure that gender-based violence is not ignored, and it doesn't, and that, you know, we don't think it happens in our modern day time. Just ask people who go on peacekeeping missions, they'll tell you, or many of you here have stories, you know it happens, and we can't allow that. And that's why I think Japan and Korea have a huge role. And this whole smart soft power initiative and dialogue, having women talk about these issues. I ask you this, have you seen women at the table to talk about these historic gender-based violence issues from World War II? Who talks about it? Shouldn't women be talking about this issue? They were the victims of this, and yet they are not at the table. And I think that is something that perhaps some of you could influence.
That's next question is, since you're recently in the IndoPACOM and retired out of it, you're an IndoPACOM leader as well, and other IndoPACOM leaders have been outspoken on the threat posed by China and the potential of cooperation between the allies and partners. What do you offer to the FAOs operating in South Korea and the other regional partners, and where we can start to see more of the increasing disapproval, but however, that has it not being overbearing as an ally towards China's threat?
You know, great question, Adrian. You know, there's always the balance that we have to do, right, as the United States, and understanding. I think the first piece is understanding that it is challenging, and all of you know that the engagements in the region, we don't want to put anybody in a position to choose, and we, you know, that is not U.S. policy, is to choose at all. In fact, you know, we all benefit from relationships with China, and we try to partner where we can, whether it's in, I just went to the JIADF West change of command today. We got a new JIADF West commander, and Admiral Aquilino was there. It was great. And one of the things they do, of course, is to, you know, partner even with the PRC, with, you know, disaster management, human trafficking, you know, illicit trade, all of those areas where we can partner with China, and economically, it's huge. But I think where we need to, you know, I was able to participate in the Free and Open Conference at the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, bringing together other countries to encourage everyone to be a unified voice on the fact that we need to abide by the rule of law, international law, and that the free and open Indo-Pacific is not just a US piece. It's not about us. It's not about us in China. It is about, so if you can message, it really is about following this idea and concept of freedom for everyone, free access to the commons, air, land, sea, cyber, and space. That it's not just about, you know, and when that comes into conflict with PRC interests, then we need to collectively speak up with one voice, a unified voice together. But I know our allies and partners need to be reassured that we're committed. And I can tell you that the whole 5.5 years I've been at IndoPACOM, and you all know it, we've been committed in operations, exercises, engagements, and finance. And we can see that right now with the current administration, as well as Secretary of Defense, Admiral Aquilino, first visit to the region to reassure Japan and Korea and all of our allies and partners, we are committed to the region. We are a Pacific nation. You know, one of the portfolio items I've had is Pacific Homeland Posture. We are a Pacific. I'm from Hawaii. I'm born and raised here. I worked a lot with Guam and CNMI. Guam, where America's Day begins. We are a Pacific nation. this is my home. I was born here. I'm from here. And this is a place I will protect. And I will protect all of our brothers and sisters who come from this region. And that has been my talking point. And wherever you can share that we are committed, and we don't want to put anybody in a position, but we all have to be reassured that should you speak up, you should, because we're all with you. We all should have access to the common resources that benefit us all. And it is not all about China.
Right. I think that's what the common resources that China is trying to overtake in that South China Sea that poses that threat. And that gives the increased tensions with China. But I think the cooperation between Iraq and Japan seems to be even more important these days. And what advice do you have to practitioners on the ground to strengthen the trilateral relationship?
Yeah, that's always a challenge. And we certainly don't want to make it seem like this is just to benefit us, because the one who benefits when there is tension between Korea and Japan is the PRC. That would be my message. They're the ones who benefit because they gain, to keep us divided instead of united. We see that in any organization. That's just a common relationship issue. We, and I know you all do so very well. You understand the history, you understand the perspectives, you understand the challenges when you sit through trilateral dialogues. And that's why even the change of command with Admiral Davidson and Admiral Aquilino, one of the first things that right after that day arranged, a trilateral dialogue, SecDef trilateral dialogue, because it is so critically important that Japan, Korea, and the United States work together, and also bilaterally. Japan and Korea don't need to really wait for us. If we can encourage them to do things together. So we're always so excited when there's previous relationships amongst our military leaders. That's the area that we can influence. But also, many of you, not just high level engagements and exchanges, but mid-grade officers, junior enlisted and officers, wherever there's opportunity to foster understanding. And, I would say to you that this is going to be going to require constant care. It is strategic. The relationship is strategic in nature. As a result, the constant education and sharing of information. And I don't like to use that messaging, because we're not just trying to message, we're trying to bring about understanding and awareness to one another. It's not a message to blindside, but being really transparent that, you got to acknowledge, one of the comments today was really great, is to apologize or ask, right? And I'm not saying anything political about formal apologies, but we know that historically, you all sit in these meetings, and that what often comes up is genuine trust, because sometimes we look too much towards the past. If you can encourage our partners and allies to look towards the future, what is the future threat and what does the future bring? So what we need to do is acknowledge past hurts, and we can model that, and we do it a lot. So for instance, I took before we, actually about 30 mid-grade PRC, and one of them was the XO of the Liaoning, to the Arizona, and took them on board and gave them a tour. And it was interesting because one officer asked me, does the Japan come to see, the Arizona? I said, yes, all the time, I remember when Prime Minister Abe, when I was here, and he came, he laid a wreath, and it is always something. And the motto of the 75th commemoration of the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th was, acknowledge the past and forge towards the future. And that is hard to do sometimes when we continue to relive that. If we do that, we remain stagnant. Whatever you can do to reassure our commitment to our allies that we are committed to you, but in order to do that, you got to work with us to move forward towards the future. Wherever we can do to facilitate cooperation, encourage bilateral across all domains, soft power, smart power, educational conferences, even women, peace, and security can be a venue for that dialogue. That's not considered so, threatening, not like a, even, I sat in a trilateral about a certain exercise that was a trilateral exercise. And it was really sometimes about misunderstanding. So wherever we can facilitate the misunderstanding, because unless you talk, you cannot work out those differences and misunderstandings. And I think each and every one of you are handpicked. You're special being FAOs. You know the nuances and the historical perspectives. You are in a key, to me, position to be able to foster this kind of cooperation, connectivity, and listening to build trust with those around you who may have a different opinion. Sometimes listening, parroting back what it is that you heard, and collaborating with one another like you're doing here, educating yourselves. What would be the solutions? Being willing to listen to really out of the box thinking about the biggest challenges in trilateral relationships. And I think if we continue to do this and don't stop, because it's not a one and done deal. This is one of those ongoing, and we like things fast. Like, can't you just fix it? Can't you just change it? It's not one of those. This is going to be long-term, and we all have to do it together to share.
Awesome. That's right on. I think it's building those relationships is sharing part of all that work together. And then I like that quote, acknowledge the past and forge the future. So makes a lot of sense. But in the interest of time, we're going to have to stop right there and then open the floor to the members in the audience. So at this time, I will open up the floor to the audience. And if you have a question, please use the raise hand function and we'll go in that order. Is there anybody with questions?
Adrian, I have a question. I'll be first to admit I'm not familiar with the raise the hand function on Zoom. I'm still learning it.
Okay.
Go
ahead. And then
my question, again, thank you for your insight and for going into more detail about the Women, Peace, and Security Initiative here within the region. And so my question really kind of focuses on two areas, Bangladesh, and then also here in Korea. And do you see a correlation between women's role in the military and their role in society? And I know it's kind of very vague in general, but I guess the example I'm trying to use, like in Bangladesh, for example, I think within South Asia, I think Bangladesh is really leading women's role in society and also in the military. I think they're further along than their neighbors. And one example is within the Rohingya camps. We've noticed with 1 million refugees in Bangladesh that came over from Myanmar, our observations and our experiences working with those refugees is that women play a significant role in those camps. And as more refugees were coming in, women were being elected to lead the small different groups within a Rohingya camp. And they kind of came up with their own system and their governing system to maintain order, security for the refugees, for the children, for the women in the camps. My observations from what I saw, I think that was more from the society, just for women's role in Myanmar, but also the role in Bangladesh is one example. But here in Korea's demonstrated a lot of leadership in that sense, but yet socially in the society, there's still some issues. Most recently, there was an army, or either army or Air Force, and someone else is familiar with the story, please chime in, was sexually assaulted by a superior officer, but that woman NCO committed suicide because she wasn't comfortable talking about that with her family or with the chain of command of the issue. And so you see a clash between social issues, but also women's roles in the military itself.
No, great question. It's great to see you, Chris. Bangladesh, you are right. They've actually sent their first all-female team to Africa as peacekeeping, and they have met all the standards, the UN standards. And a lot of it is, national leadership that they have been pressing. And they've picked, some of the brightest, like engineers and aeronautical, engineers, these amazing women. And it's interesting what they said when they went to, I got to speak to some, because when I did the BDD in Dhaka, what they did was, when Ambassador Bernadette was there, that's how long ago that was, but, many of them said that the women in Africa would come up to them, whether it's Mali or the Congo, and say, "Are you here to just cook?" And not that cooking's bad, that's wonderful, but that's the lens in which they saw things. They go, "No, I'm an engineer, and I'm gonna redesign your camp, and I'm here to," and they were like, "Wow, yeah, that's so amazing." But it comes from national leadership. And everyone I met, every chief of the Army, Air Force, Navy, and the Coast Guard, I met with all of them. They all talked to me first about what they were doing on women, peace, and security. I didn't even ask. And that wasn't even on the BDD agenda. I mean, they just did it. And it just happened naturally because they figured, Admiral Harris sent this female officer, and it was just because I'm the 5 with James, and it was just how it was. I was an officer who happens to be female, and it was male leadership who made sure that they're in the power position. So I'm always advocating for male leader whenever I can. Don't just pick me because I'm female, but you need the men to do that. And I think we see that with Secretary Austin. You see that with General Milley. You see that with General McConville. With the our own Fort Hood issues. Right. So you saw what happened in Korea. We have our own issues here, but people our leaders are standing up and saying that is completely unacceptable. I will hold all of these leaders accountable if you foster an environment that allows those things to happen. So I think, our Korean leaders, and I think most of the general officers in the Korean leadership are men, that they have to speak up, that this will not be allowed and not be tolerated. And they have to mean it. So that means in the interactions, not tolerate discrimination against their women, soldiers, sailors, airmen, or Marines. And also sometimes, I gotta say, shifting that power, I've been very fortunate. All of my bosses have been men. They've been able to shift power in a international environment to me, and they do it very subtly, just masterfully. And I think that that's important when you want to change thinking in a group that is so used to thinking a certain way. And I think even those of you men, mostly men in this group, and maybe some of our women in the group might agree, that when you're in a group and you shift power in a room by acknowledging something, you don't realize the power in that. There is power in that, and you have the power to do that more so than sometimes women do in a room. You need male advocates. And that's one of the pushes now with IndoPACOM is you've got to have that. It's got gender advisors don't need to just be women or women peace and security advocates. It's got to be, all of you on the line.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
All right. Next question is from Twit.
Yes,
Go
hi.
ahead,
Thank you.
I Twit.
Hi, how are you? I guess my question is that the Women, Peace, Security Act is fairly recent. So where do you see, I guess, it moving forward in the next few years? And then also, how is it broadening to other agencies? Because I noticed that a metric, it involves the amount of money dedicated to responding for gender-based violence. And I know a lot of those monies lie in other agencies besides DoD, including USAID and DOJ. So how is the interagency work and work with other sectors, such as the NGOs, going?
No, that's great. So our great question, Twit, because USAID, Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, Department of Justice, all have a role in our national action plan. And so that national action plan has identified, and there's a huge matrix, and it says all of these responsibilities by interagency. State Department has a big role, USAID, and USAID just came out with their master plan, and so did DHS. And they all have a piece of that. And you're right on the funding. So it was great to have this first tranche of funding, but that's not enough. It's got to, there's got to be more, because to have teeth, you've got to put money against it if you believe in it, and you're gonna impact much more. And it's not a lot of money, but it's enough when you're asking people to take these positions out of high or dual hat people, because this was a side thing for me when I was in the 5. So I did this in addition to, all the other, things that we had to do, 36 nations, 14 time zones, right, James? I mean, it's just a lot of stuff in IndoPACOM. So having now a funded gender advisor and a team has been great. But that team's so PACOM.
Great, thank you.
Oh, the hand, Jonathan's got the hand up. You're on mute, Adrian.
Hey, ma'am.
Go ahead. Jonathan.
Sorry, John McDonald here. I'm a retired FAO, in case you couldn't tell. I just had a question about the what is it, gender representative?
Gender advisor.
Yeah, I'm sorry, gender advisor. So it seems to me that kind of, rather than having a specific person for that role, it seems to me that the COCOM senior FAO, I mean, it seems to me that would be in his or her purview, as opposed to just having one specific person just for that, since FAOs should know military, political, cultural, societal aspects of the partner nations. So what is the what was the reason for the decision to have a specific role for that, or is it just to focus more on it?
That's a great question. No, and I'm glad you asked, because I didn't clarify. So the gender advisor really just gives the advice and helps the training, because everybody needs to have the training. So the goal is to get everybody trained. So certain units who are forward leaning, I actually, especially the land component piece of the Army, I don't think we do a very good job. So actually I had a chance to talk to General Richardson, General Potter, General Daniels. We actually had a female general officer. We had 70, by the way, in all 3 components of the Army. Women were general officers, and I was able to share women, peace, and security. But by service, we're not doing that good of a job. So when you talk about implementation, it's going to be a journey, because this training, only as of 3 years ago, the Joint Staff actually has the joint training, and DOD, and actually IndoPACOM, our team. You remember Brad Smith, James, Brad in the 5-7, they came up with this, the actually training using Australia and New Zealand's training. They kind of had it all done. Australia, New Zealand, and Canada are way ahead. But the training would allow people like yourself. So any of you could do the Women, Peace, and Security training, which I think is it's a week, and it might be worthwhile, because it looks at all different aspects. Because probably many of you, when you heard WPS, you thought, oh, this is a equality program, or, oh, don't we already have sexual harassment? I mean, isn't that how much training you're going to get? But when you actually, just this cursory discussion, you realize, because intuitively, it is about looking at the operational environment and how do I maximize look at the human terrain that I'm going into for the purposes of security, success, recovery, prevention, all of that. It is much bigger than what we think it is. But the name Women, throws people off. I mean, I'm not speaking for all of you, but I've noticed that over my time, that when you use that word, it's like, oh, it's another like special program. But really, this is smart. It's a smart way to approach the operating environment. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next is Amos.
Hi, ma'am. Good evening from Omaha. Thanks so much for sharing your valuable time. I was hoping to get your perspective on a question that I suspect you've encountered before. We've been very fortunate with the great four-star commanders the Army and Navy have sourced for USFK and IndoPACOM, respectively. But unlike every other combatant command, we've consistently sourced these positions from a single service. So acknowledging the individual is more important than the service, and the services are all well represented outside the front office. I was just wondering, looking forward, what do you think are the possibilities we'll see a comm from another service? And what do you think would be some of the trade-offs if we made that change and start rotating these positions from the entirety of the joint general and flag officer community?
Thanks so much, Amos. A great question that gets asked a lot. Especially when General Shaughnessy, between Admiral Harris, Admiral Davidson, people are like, oh, maybe it's General Brooks, maybe it's going to be General Shaughnessy, right? And oh no, it'd probably be maybe this time around, maybe General Abrams, maybe. And everybody thought, well, because Senator McCain's not here, and he actually pushed that. No way, So it was a lot of congressional push, other political factors. But really, being an Army officer, being there 5.5 years, I can tell you, it has taken a while when we look at the challenges in the South China Sea, and even talking with other Army officers, I think it's going to be a while. I mean, I know commanding, but when you talk about the current challenges, unless that shifts and changes, when Third Fleet in itself has 60 ships, when you don't understand that part, and it takes a long time to do that, and within 5.5 years as an Army officer, I've learned enough to be dangerous and scary, or like just throw out some, the DDG and its range, and the carrier strike group. I can do that. Like, okay, I see when Josh is like, Duran is like, yeah, but it's not. I have come to appreciate the reason why. Let me just say that. And I'm sure our other brothers and sisters in the other service don't appreciate an Army retired officer saying that, but this is really, I understand why much more clearly than I did before. However, that doesn't mean that the environment doesn't change in the future, where there's room potentially for, Air Force, and then, should the environment change again, where, the seas do not become that major piece. But when you talk about economically, where trillions of dollars of our trade goes through the South China Sea, or the 75% of world trade goes to the Malacca Straits, where there's contested environment is really in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, Sea of Japan, or EC, whoever you want, whatever perspective you want to use. Or the second island chain, ballistic missile defense, all of those pieces that have that naval maritime expertise that we need at the 4-star level. I think when that environment changes, then perhaps it will be considered. That's a Suzanne Vares-Lum opinion.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. That's a great perspective.
All right, appreciate that, Amos. This is the last question from James. Go ahead.
Actually, I don't have a question, but I just want to make a few comments. And when it comes to WPS, it has actually different meaning in the Philippines. It means West Philippine Seas. But I know that as General Vares-Lum has stated, actually the Philippines is kind of in a leading way with women, peace, and security. Army War College has just reached out to my boss, Colonel Ma, regarding some data. And Philippines has exceeded as far as sending the percentage number of female to the international military exchange programs. Last year, I think we reached about 20%. And as you across the dimes, economically, we have, Sarah Duterte is the leading candidate for next presidency, and we have a few other mayors. So I think overall, Philippines has healthy open door for female to politically, or even in the armed forces of Philippines, they do promote them. So, and I just want to also reach out to everyone here. Once we go back to kind of norm to the COVID environment, I would like to have an open invitation. I'd love to have Suzanne Vares-Lum come visit us. But right now, I know that because of COVID environment, actually we have to have like approval from the Department of Foreign Affairs to anyone to come in, so which is a very rigorous process. But also reaching out to other FAOs, Navy, Marines. There are great stuff happening in the Philippines. So, maybe for next, I know that Army is moving forward to the Papa, so you'll have opportunity to come out. And I know kind of Hopgood and I discussed many other options besides from being stationed in Korea, Japan. Coming out to the Southeast Asia country is a great gig, actually great opportunity.
That's great, James. So great to see you. And you're absolutely right. The Philippines, just like I said, the whole battalion of women, like to have that foresight that, if we want to engage the population, I need to engage with who do I select to do that? And they considered the environment and thought about what are the root causes. And, just like healthcare, right? If you want to, that women, if you study an environment that women have access to healthcare, they're the caretakers of the elderly, then that you need to engage them and put the right people in there to engage them. So I think the Philippines, and I met Gloria, she's on Duterte's cabinet. She went to APCSS. I was in a class with her. Gosh, I forgot her last, Mascapal or something like that. She is like a proponent for women, peace and security, and has the ear of Duterte. And she said she wrote one of their first, their own national action plan to implement women, peace and security.
Yes, ma'am. I believe Gloria, she's the undersecretary or assistant secretary.
Yeah, she's awesome. Spitfire.
All right. Thanks, James. Appreciate that. Look forward to when COVID ends to take a trip to the Philippines. Ma'am, I appreciate your time, and you gave a lot of discussion and dialogue on perspectives for women, peace and security program and threats posed by China in the IndoPACOM region. At this time, I'm gonna leave it to you for any closing statements and anything you have for the rest of the audience.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Wei, and all of you who took your time out to have this little coffee chat. I love it. It's great. It's really an intimate time, and I know you all are very busy, but clearly you believe in just the power of collaboration, the power to in Hawaii we call coffee chat talk story time. And there's power in that. Oh, there's a little friend. Hi. I'm sorry. But there is, I cannot say enough how impressed I am with all of you and how exciting it is to know that, you guys are at the forefront, the leaders. You are the future. When we look to the future, you're the future. Whether it's, you're not in the military anymore, but you're going to do what's next in your journey, where are you going to take all these experiences in your community or internationally. It's super exciting just to know that you guys are America, and you're the faces of America. And we have so much to share with the world. That Americanism is not about race or ancestry. Americanism is about a set of values and principles that we believe in, the Constitution. And that's what makes me so proud to be American, and proud to serve with all of you. And I feel like like an aunt who's just going to brag about all of you, and I'm going to definitely do that. And if I can do anything to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. And if it's just a question or you want me to look into it, I'll be here in Hawaii. I'm a strategic advisor also to the Military Affairs Council. So I stay close to Admiral Aquilino and a lot of the senior leaders here. So again, if there's anything I can do, don't hesitate.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate that. And hopefully we have another dialogue with you in the future. Looking forward to that, though. Wei, I'll turn it over to you for closing admin remarks or anything for the board members.
Thank you, Adrian. And ma'am, thank you once again so much for your time, your wisdom, and your generosity. I've been extremely humbled by your demonstrated support for our alliances and for FAOs that are serving around the world. I know I've benefited from this discussion, and I hope you'll continue to consider our small chapter in this next chapter of what will surely continue to be an illustrious career. In closing, for members joining us today, thank you for your excellent questions. Please be sure to tell any other FAOs and military and civilian counterparts about the chapter. I and the members of the board are always looking for your feedback. As a reminder, if you've not already signed up for membership or want to make a donation so we can continue to host great events, please go to FAOA.org and remember that you're donating to the Korea chapter. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, wherever your endeavors may have been.